turning a happy accident into something delicious. This is Now We're Cooking. When life gives you lemons, make bean soup. Or, in this case, when life gives you the wrong pork roast, make a pork and bean soup, or a quote-unquote ham and bean soup. This obviously isn't ham, but we're going to make a pork broth with the bone in this, and we're going to make a delicious soup, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. So originally I had planned on doing a pork rib roast, which is essentially the same thing as a beef rib roast or beef ribeye roast with the bones in, but it's just, from a pig. It's delicious. Amazing. When I got this thing home, though, I realized that it had been cut kind of weirdly and wasn't going to work for the presentation and the look that I was hoping to show you because it just doesn't look right. It still tasted great, but I figured, well, what the heck? Let's make some bean soup. It was one of my favorite soups growing up. We can make a bone broth with the bone inside this thing. And, a little backstory. I fell in love with bean soup because of Campbell's bean soup, but when I had a real homemade version of it, boy, was I in love. So we got this meat all prepped. The spices that we used, I showed you earlier, and we're just going to go ahead and give those a quick rub here. Something to note is this soup is typically made with ham hock or a leftover ham bone, and because I'm using a regular roast, and technically I decided to make the soup after the fact, so I seasoned this like I would if it was a regular roast, and while these spices are going to be fine for you, you may want to dial them back just a little bit, as they're not going to be totally necessary, as we're going to be seasoning the soup as well, so just keep that in mind. Now, I'm not going to be going through the cooking process of this roast because we're going to be doing the proper bone-in pork rib roast later in the coming week or two here, so we're going to leave that for another time, but as you can see here, it turned out very nicely. Now, once we decided we were making this soup, we needed some celery, carrot, garlic, onion, parsley, and I used thyme because that's what I had, but bay leaves work great too. We obviously had some leftover pork, so we chopped that up. We also used some bacon, and the reason we did this was to add some of that smoky element that you get out of a ham and bean soup that we just weren't going to be able to get due to the fact we used a regular pork roast. Now, to make our pork broth, all we did was we put our discarded bone into a pot with enough water to cover it a little more than halfway. We brought it to a boil and then brought that water down to just above a simmer and let it go for about 2 hours. So ideally, you would have made your bone broth prior to preparing the rest of this soup. However, we didn't really have that option, or at least we didn't want to use that option. We wanted to make this at the same time. So what I did was I used some of the reserved bacon fat. This was going to help give the soup a little extra smokiness as well and bacony kind of flavor. And we're going to saute our vegetables in this pan. In the pan we're going to be cooking the entire soup in. We're going to saute these for about 2 minutes or until the onions start becoming soft. Next goes the garlic, and this is going to cook until just about the time that it becomes aromatic in your kitchen. You can notice the smell of delicious cooked garlic. Next goes the meat, and this will go in for about another 1.5 to 2 minutes. Stir a little. We're breaking this down a little bit. We're just kind of melding the flavors together slowly but surely. Now, this next step is totally dependent upon the person or what you have on hand. Is a lot of times soup gets made by accident, sort of the way I did it. I had chicken broth, and I didn't have enough bone broth to do the entire soup with pork bone broth. So what I did instead was I used chicken bone broth halfway, and I used the pork the other half, and that's about 1 3/4 cups each. Now, you notice I didn't put the bone broth in from my pork yet. That's just because it wasn't done yet, but you can absolutely just put it all in together at the same time. And at this point, you're also going to be bringing the soup up to a quick boil and then right down to a simmer and adding your fresh herbs, your parsley and your thyme and or bay leaves. So while we're throwing this now finished pork bone broth in, as I mentioned earlier in this video, sometimes life gives you lemons, and in which case you have to make bean soup or lemonade or whatever the heck it may be. Well, in this case, my video of adding the beans became corrupted, so I don't have that. But I guarantee you there are beans in this bean soup, and they're cannellini beans. You can use those. You can also use navy beans. Will work great as well. I just used the cannellini. They're a little bit bigger and a little softer, I feel. Now, after bringing all that up to a boil, we then reduce it down to a simmer, cover it up, and let it cook for about an hour to 2 hours. Garnish with a little black pepper, if you'd like. I do. And enjoy. It's delicious, and you'll love it. Thank you guys for stopping by the channel. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, maybe consider liking this and subscribing to the channel for more content. Appreciate you stopping by today. Have a good one.